You no longer draw me in because of your fat stomach. Robert shocked me by telling me that I shouldn't have gotten a divorce when I was pregnant and advised me to raise the kids on my own. I had the impression that I was alone on the streets. Then something miraculous occurred. I found an excuse to accept the divorce and said, "Okay, here are the divorce papers." After 3 months, he began phoning me nonstop. I'm Jasmine, and I work in an everyday workplace. I've never had a very exceptional life, but right now I feel like I'm at my best. Jasmine, will you support me? My boss, Robert, who worked in sales at a big trading business, was the man I married. I was 27 when we first went on a date. I didn't think much of him at first because I considered him to be a trustworthy senior colleague. But it was during a business party that I saw just how trustworthy he was. He was courteous, well-liked by others, and enthusiastic about what he did. Every day I am in awe of his sales tactics. I found it difficult to voice my thoughts, unlike Robert. It took me a few years to speak up and find my voice. Robert was a really enthusiastic instructor, and I could not help but be captivated by his energy. After being promoted to section chief, he began contacting me more regularly, which suggested that he was aware of my feelings. After our relationship started, he proposed to me a year later. "I've been wanting to ask you this for so long, but I have feelings for you. Would you like to marry me?" He exclaimed nervously. I felt giddy looking at him, that I couldn't even utter a word, so I excitedly nodded my head, slightly tearing up. We've made it to the finish line today at last. To be honest, I felt like I was going to heaven. I was so happy. Since I had never been in a meaningful relationship or had any romantic experiences before, this was perhaps the first time in my life that I felt such extreme delight. But before things took a turn for the worse, I believed that falling in love with Robert was a mistake that I couldn't take back. I became pregnant a year after I married Robert. Eager to observe Robert's reaction, I left the hospital with excitement. However, his reply came as a horrifying surprise. With complete discomfort, he said, "Huh? What do you mean you're pregnant?" His remarks, "Didn't you marry me to support my life?" summed up how he felt exactly. "Did you not take birth control pills?" It stunned me. I had always desired children, and we were constructing our lives together after marriage. I had assumed Robert would be equally content, but he was really unhappy. Robert regarded me as a flatmate and never desired children. It dawned on me during our conversation about my pregnancy. "Birth control? You made no mention of birth control at all. I thought you'd be happy." His remarks were too harsh. I lost control of my emotions and retaliated. Robert let out a deep sigh at that same time. "You're simply not getting it. You are garbage, making a huge mess of my life," he said again, clearly disgusted and frustrated. "You used to work for me, so you can't even pretend that acting in a way that you're not taught is what it means to be an adult. Is your mind too devoid of substance to comprehend that?" He tapped my head with his index finger and said, He spoke with such intensity and conviction that I could sense his hatred and rage. This was not intended to be bad news. How come he married me at all? He disclosed one more startling reality as I was thinking this. "When I married you, I figured you could at least take care of the housework. But here you are opening up new things for me to take care of. Honestly, I'm thinking about filing for divorce," he continued, his words nearly seeming like a threat that broke my heart. Robert smirked and continued, overcome with melancholy and unable to say, "I was really considering hiring a maid before I married you. Although I detest doing housework, you seemed to enjoy me, didn't you? You never disregarded my advice, and I'd heard you were adept at doing housework. I believed that we would both benefit from it. It appears that you deceived me." More than outraged, his absurd statements made me sad. I tried to distract myself from the discomfort by biting my lip out of fear of crying. "I never desired to have kids with you. Who requested you to become pregnant? It was common sense to take birth control. You are responsible for that. And I regret marrying him with all of my heart. He eventually insisted that I get an abortion, of course, but I immediately refused. I had no option but to follow his instructions until I could figure out how to sustain myself. With my head down to the floor, I pleaded with him for the sake of our kid. I stuck by his side as a consequence, but just as a flatmate. I was only his spouse in the name. As a condition of not being a couple, I was permitted to give birth to the kid. I'll pay, but I won't give the child any care at all. You're on your own with it. His words pierced my heart, as if he were placing the burden of caring for a pet on me. When I married him, I resigned from my work at his request. After our divorce, if I went back to my old employment, I would have to face Robert every day, which I could not bear. I had to live this life until I got a new job and a steady salary. I was depressed with those ideas every day. I'll work outdoors if you properly maintain the house. You only have to take care of the housework, he stated. Even while we were dating, I knew he wasn't very good at housework, but I foolishly believed he was depending on me. Maybe this was one of his motivations for wanting to wed me. I could never get away from the emotional abuse I suffered at his hands, especially now that we had a kid. It would be terrible to go from his above-average income to nothing, which is worse for a child, living in a home devoid of affection or in poverty. After I had to make this difficult decision, I received terrible news of my parents passing away. I was only able to see my parents around once a year after I got married. Because I was only permitted to go back home for 3 days when Robert was gone for a business meeting. He would make it plain that I couldn't just leave him food by asking, "If you leave the house, what am I supposed to eat?" Such self-serving remarks implied that my few vacations home were a reward for my daily labors and the limited pleasures in life. The only filial responsibility I could provide was to report about my child, but even that was taken away from me. I thought my life had reached its lowest point. I later got an email correspondence from an addressee I did not recognize. I opened it with unease and was astonished to see what was inside. It included a photo and the sender's phone number along with the words, "If you read this letter, please contact me anytime." I took the image to be proof that the letter was authentic. I agreed to meet them and sobbed as I told them everything over the phone. "You wish to see your family members considering your living situation? How are you so self-centered?" "What about the food I was eating at the time?" Robert asked. "Please, I have to handle my parents' business and follow the necessary steps. Not even that I've told them enough about our child. They want to see me just once, please. I can't afford to pay for your outings." He barraged me with harsh, icy words and screamed, "If you go, pay with your own money." But I was no longer able to be hurt by Robert's comments. I could just ignore his pestering since my heart was so numb. But Robert, who was normally so stern, seemed to suddenly get brighter, as though he had a thought. "Hold on. I just realized I had to go on a business trip. You can spend around 3 days at home. Just be sure to return before I do." This was out of the ordinary. Robert never gave me this much leeway. Later on, it would become evident why this unusual forbearance was being extended. I went back to my hometown and met the letter's sender with Robert's consent. On my mother's side, it was my maternal grandparents. My grandma was Japanese, and my grandfather was American. Having grown up in America, my mother traveled to Japan for her undergraduate studies because she was fascinated by Japanese culture. It was there that she and my father were married. Their marriage was not, however, widely acknowledged. My folks opposed the marriage and fervently wanted her to remain in America. The couple fled together and were unable to travel to Japan until they received the tragic news of their deaths. Since we had already forgiven them a long time ago, we were unsure of how to deal with them. I truly feel bad for being such an obstinate fool. I would have been happy for them to be married if I had known that this would happen. When my grandparents' acquaintance informed them of their passing, they were devastated and regretted it. They held themselves responsible for my parents' demise. It seems that the same person had informed them about me, their grandson, while I was engrossed in these thoughts. They had heard that I was pregnant and were concerned about my well-being. Given what we did to your parents, it may be difficult for you to accept us, but know that we are always on your side. Do not be afraid to seek help if you need it at all. I swear to keep you safe no matter what. Never assume you're alone when things get hard, please. With her gentle words and reassuring warmth, my Grandma Allison stated, "You can always depend on us without hesitation." Their warmth brought back the sense of numbness in my heart after I had fought for so long to preserve the kid within my tummy. My grandparents were shocked to see me crying in this way and politely asked what had occurred. They were angry and gave me something when they found out about my current predicament. "This is not the life you have to live anymore. We'll support you. Would you kindly let us? You just have to worry about yourself and the child. Put money worries aside. Observe self-care." Their encouraging remarks gave me the confidence to file for divorce. I promised to get even with my husband. Robert, though, moved first before I could do anything. When I got back to our house, Robert was all fired up and held the letter from my grandparents in front of me. "What is this letter? You went through my desk without agreement?" I was mad. "This is my home. I'm free to do what I choose. Even if it's your house, there's something called privacy. How are you feeling today? Talking back to me in that way makes you appear different." I had to admit, it was amazing how well he could sense even the smallest shift in me. Still, it didn't really matter if he had read the letter. There was nothing wrong with the letter. It only stated that my grandparents existed. However, Robert suggested a divorce based on that letter. "I think you made up the story in the letter about meeting this elderly man and woman. Did you return to your hometown to go on a date with a man?" "What? You can't possibly mislead me with such stupid deception. I am aware that you have been having fun behind my back by utilizing the internet or some other technique. You're a liar." "Hold on a second. How did you reach that judgment? You are the one who knows best that I don't have time for anything like that." I was unable to understand his ridiculous implication. It was just too much. I had a headache and my stomach hurt. "That's something you've never done before. Do you really believe that a falsehood this blatant can fool me? Never undervalue me." He was not paying any attention. I was uncomfortable with Robert because he was attempting to trap me with an overly dramatic justification. "I'm let down by you. Not that I had high hopes in the first place. What then?" At this stage, one would often show proof of their innocence and demonstrate the ridiculousness of Robert's claims. But my thoughts, as someone considering divorce, were different. I purposefully allowed Robert to go on because I wanted him to say what came next. "Let's part ways. In any case, our marriage was essentially based on shared interests. You've become ugly and overweight. Take care of the children yourself. I no longer desire any interaction with you." He achieved his goal precisely. I gave Robert the divorce documents that he had left behind. "Absolutely. Here are the divorce papers. Sign them, and before you decide otherwise, I'll take them tomorrow." "Why do you have this?" He eyed me. "I will take care of your residence. Finding something like this and cleaning the house are two easy tasks." It was untrue. In all honesty, I had long since seen the divorce papers he had put on his desk as a potential danger. He subtly implied that he could get rid of me at any time, making sure that I was always afraid of him and would never hurt him again. I was terrified of that one piece of paper every single day. "You suddenly have a lot of confidence. Can you truly exist without me, having no life skills? Don't underestimate me. I will no longer rely on someone such as yourself. I will use all of my might to keep my child safe." It was, in fact, a gamble. Inside, I was nervous. wondering what would happen if Robert saw that I had suddenly become brave. But I had a suspicion as to why Robert was bringing up the divorce now. I thus understood that he would not back down from his divorce proposal, and this was also a win-win situation for him. Oh my goodness! If you have such an attitude, then bring up that child by yourself. As we are separating amicably, I will not be interacting with you or the child in any way. I never see that kid, and I don't want you anywhere near me, got it? All right. This concludes our conversation. Thus, I divorced Robert when I was around 9 months pregnant. I was able to pack up my things and go out of his place on time since I had some funds from my years of being alone. I went to my grandparents' house to take care of some business. Later, I gave birth to my first child, a healthy boy. With expectations for his robust and sturdy growth, I gave him the name. His kid grew up so quickly, and his grandparents and I both loved seeing him grow and lead happy lives. My phone rang 3 months later, and it was from an unknown number. My expression soured as I replied, "What in the world is happening? Describe." I was nearly tempted to respond, but his voice was so high-pitched and tremulous. I believed it was a lady phoning at first. I recoiled involuntarily as soon as I heard his voice, being uneasy at the mere sound of it. I wanted to hang up the phone right away, but he kept talking as I listened. "You founded the business? I haven't heard of this before. During our marriage, where did you acquire that lot of money? That money belongs to me. Return it immediately, you cunning lady." The voice obviously belonged to Robert, who had somehow learned about my new business. "Someone is stealing my money?" he said, accusing me in the manner of a debt collector. I groaned in shock at Robert's point of view. I spoke coolly, even though I didn't fully understand the situation. "Well, why do you think this is a scam? There isn't any proof that I took your money. Stop talking, you liar. You likely stole extra money from me to cover your living expenses in secret. Even if that were the case, I could never have saved up enough money to launch a business. A month's worth of spending was hardly covered by the living expenses. Don't act absurd. How did you obtain so much money then? When you were jobless and living with me, no employment could have provided you with that kind of money. You just were unaware of my possessions. I had $1.1 million just before our split." "How come? 1.1 million? Robert surprised himself and spoke out. This news obviously took him aback as he choked on his words. "What is your source of income?" The elderly couple I described are the grandparents of my mother. They are the proprietors of a well-known computer software business worldwide. I met them before our divorce, and they gave me a bank book with the money they had been saving for me. They consistently save money for their prospective grandchild. Robert must have been stunned beyond belief. It was simply calming to see him looking completely stunned. I went ahead and changed the account's name right away, following the divorce. As my grandparents were traveling from a far-off place, I had to move swiftly to make sure everything went as well as possible. Thank goodness, the money was available to me the day they landed in Japan, because the name change was finished that day. I didn't know my grandparents had funds since my parents had told me they had died when I was a little child. When they discovered the money, I assumed they had been duped. They probably didn't say anything because they thought it would help me. My grandparents got in touch with me when my parents passed away, found out about my circumstances, and made the decision to help. As soon as they realized the true reasons for the divorce, they pledged to support me. When Robert discovered the truth, he became enraged. He started making blatantly contradictory statements, even though it was he who had precipitously pushed for the divorce. "I wouldn't have divorced you if I knew this. You have a lot of nerve not to try to comprehend my circumstances." "That's because you're terrible at explaining things," I shot back. "Is it the reason you and your new wife quarrel all the time? Always putting the blame somewhere else?" Robert's desperate response amused me, as he looked at a loss for words. "You expect me to miss it? We collaborated. I didn't have to do any research. I now realize the secret. Rest certain, though, that I am very relieved that you will wed the vice president's daughter. I no longer have to deal with you, and there's no chance that we will remarry." Surprised, Robert said, "You don't have to be that strict. We had once been in love. Is it not possible for us to make amends?" With a chilly reply, I said, "What are you talking about? I'm not even trying to understand what you're saying. I want to get back together with you. But who said that?" After our divorce, I felt relieved. My grandparents have been incredibly generous to me and my child. I've at last discovered happiness. Give your crap to your wife to handle. I want no contact with you at all. Now that I was emotionally stable again, I thought back to the awful times I spent with Robert, and the repressed rage sprang to the surface. Robert winced as he realized I was no longer fond of him. Trying a fresh tactic, he then said, "Well, could you offer me some money? With the high maintenance demands of my new wife, I hardly have any money left over for spending. She goes out virtually every night, is demanding, and does not perform housekeeping correctly. I assume you have $1 million? Would you please give me some?" "Avoid being absurd. I have spent every last dime on you. Give up requesting money for your own convenience," he added. Robert seemed surprised at my answer. I went on. "I established my business and purchased a new home with all of the money. I have used up all of my $1.1 million. I apologize, but I am unable to assist you." I expected Robert, knowing his selfish character, to come begging for money as soon as he found out about my predicament. I promptly moved my money into fixed assets as a self-defense measure. To enable single moms to live freely, I established a nursing home with a nursery using the majority of the funds I used to purchase a new home. The service gained a lot of popularity and positive feedback from mothers facing comparable circumstances. I did extensive research, used social media, and spoke with my grandparents for guidance on the company's processes and website to learn what was required of single parents in the job. To satisfy these demands, I founded my own business. "I can't believe you're running such a successful business," said an astonished Robert. "It always annoyed me so much when you had a condescending manner. I can now tell you that, while you felt you could do anything and that I was garbage, you were incredibly mistaken," I replied coldly. "For the rest of your life, I hope you will regret abandoning me." "Your absence won't change anything," I retorted. "Jasmine, hold on, please give us another opportunity. I'll bend down, clean your house, do everything you want." "Are you kidding? Even if it meant losing you, I would never get back together. Please never come to inform my kid that you are his father. Instead, have a happy life with your current spouse." Robert was still yelling when I immediately cut him off and blocked his number. I updated my phone number as well. My grandparents offered to buy me a bodyguard and set up security cameras at my house out of worry for my safety. I smiled at their defensive posture, even though I felt embarrassed. Robert's relationship with the CEO's daughter did not work out well. He was allegedly controlled and cheated out of his pay, according to reports from former co-workers. His position at work declined as rumors about him proliferated, and he developed a reputation for being unfaithful. He was supposedly living a difficult and restricted life, and was unable to quit since he was the son-in-law of the CEO. Co-workers would make jokes about his situation, and I couldn't help but laugh along with them. I was able to live a calm life at last. With the affection of his great-grandparents, my kid has grown up healthy. As his 9th birthday draws near, I've told him all there is to know about Robert. Every day, his words, "I'll always stay by your side, Mommy," bring me joy.